And of course, Georgia and Lance, despite the situation there taking place in Japan as we get ready for the Tokyo Olympics, the JOA, the president, Christopher Samuda, has made it clear that, they're going full force, there's no reason to panic and everything will be okay. How do you feel?
There's every reason to panic. I can accept him saying that they're going full force and that they have every intention of sending athletes over there and that they're satisfied with the measures that the Japanese will put in place. But I can't reconcile with him saying that there is no reason to panic. Never in the history of mankind has there been more reason to panic than now.
Well, not his exact words, though. That's just me paraphrasing because, he seems to be... Right, he seems that his stance... Yeah, I just want to make that clear.
Okay.
His stance is, we're going forward despite what's taking place. Because, the reason I put it in that way, there's a lot of opposition. So many people coming out, George and Lance, and saying that, just a couple days away, but the situation is not getting better. Even the citizens there in Tokyo, Japan, saying that there won't be enough hospital beds and whatnot, yet in Jamaica, we seem to be going forward.
Well, the fact is that there is a lot of mental discomfort about the games going in. A lot of it coming from Tokyo, where the games are being staged, and the citizens there are uncomfortable about the rising COVID-19 stats and so on, and hosting, thousands and thousands of people for the Olympic Games, which will be a 2.5, 3 week competition schedule. But if you listen to most of the athletes talking and the people who are set to be competing, they seem to be focusing on the job at hand. And I guess that's what the IOC will be depending on, that the athletes participating will be, not as distracted about what is happening around them and compete. And we know when the action starts and the quality performances start, being displayed, then, many people will think less about the COVID-19 issues and so on. But to agree with George, there is a lot of mental discomfort going in. I've never, headed into an Olympic Games feeling the way I feel now about the Games because, there's just so many things. There are just so many things happening, not in a good way surrounding the Games. So it's a distraction that's worth talking about.
And I think I can understand the JOA stance because the last thing they want to be holding the position that they hold is, inciting fear into the athletes and, just creating unnecessary panic. And I'm saying that, very loosely because of the position that the JOA holds, right? They wouldn't want to just, create that sort of tension when they can, at least try to keep the athletes at ease and ensure that they do what they have to do and focus on the Olympics. Well, we're moving. Lance, you want to say something?
I was just saying that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee President, Brian Lewis, also, unreservedly gave a thumbs up to the athletes going and so on. So generally, and he's also the head of the Caribbean Association of National Olympic Committees. So he's representing the entire body for the region.
Definitely. Well, we're moving on now. 4-time Grand Slam singles champion Naomi Osaka is one of the sport's most engaging characters. And it's fair to say her silence will be keenly felt at the upcoming French Open at Roland Garros in Paris. On Wednesday, Osaka announced on social media that she would not be attending press conferences during the French Open. She wrote, "I've often felt that people have no regard for athletes' mental health, and this rings very true whenever I see a press conference or partake in one. We're often sat there and asked questions that bring doubt into our minds, and I'm just not going to subject myself to people that doubt me." Well, back in 2018, Serena Williams had a high-profile meltdown in her loss to Osaka in the final of the US Open. At the post-match press conference, Osaka was barely asked about her triumph, as she was bombarded with questions about Serena. 4 months later, after she won the Australian Open, she was visibly irritated by the first question at her press conference, where a male journalist said to her, "Apparently, you're unable to win a slam without some drama." So, George, you are the president of the Press Association in Jamaica, and I'm actually going to question you with that hat on. How do you feel about some journalists that, ask some questions that really aren't called for at the particular moment in time?
Well, look, journalists have to do their work, Journalists have different ways in which to elicit a comment from an athlete that will make a headline, that will dominate the news cycle. not just for the day. Well, nowadays it's so competitive and the news cycle is so short. Well, not so short. It's never ending that, you know, if you get something to dominate the news for a day, you'll feel a sense of triumph. Usually it was dominating the news cycle for days on end. But I say that to say it is within a journalist's right to seek to provoke the athlete into a response that will provide copy, that will provide news stories even beyond the point of the press conference, if you get what I'm saying. So journalists have various means and tactics of doing just that. Some of the best responses that athletes have given, best from the perspective of it driving the news cycle, have been from questions that you would call banal. Some questions that you're saying, that's not a sensible question. But then you hear the athlete answering and talking and talking and talking and eventually mentioning something that then becomes the main talking point coming out of the press conference. So I'm not going to be critical of those who serve this noble vocation. People have different means and methods. Personally, a lot of the questions I hear asked at press conferences, I would never ask those questions. I have my ways of getting the information out. And I think a lot of the post-match press conferences at events like the Grand Slams and so forth are unnecessary. Nobody sits after watching the action to say, I wonder what Naomi's going to say about how she played that point or whatever. Very few people do that. People watch the action and they move on. So the issue of the press conference, or the concept of the press conference, I think is overrated, it's outdated, and then you have everybody trying to make a name because, I want to be remembered as the one who asked the bombshell question, and that's when you have the ridiculousness coming in.
All right, so let's take a look now at what actually happened when the journalist asked that question. We're not going to be seeing Naomi Osaka. Would you say that journalists would have failed? Because the point of a press conference is to get the athletes to talk.
Yeah.
Now, this has reached the extent where we won't be seeing Naomi Osaka. She will not be answering your questions moving forward.
Well, Lance is a former journalist of the year, sports journalist of the year, so he can answer that one.
Lance?
Disappointing, I would say. This story is not completely disconnected with the Russell Westbrook story we dealt with earlier on, and the fact that Trae Young was spat on by a spectator as well in the NBA last night. I say that to say, just to concur with a point that you, George, and Mariah had made earlier on, that these are human beings. These sports stars are human beings. They're not robots, so they have feelings. So this is what Naomi Osaka is talking about. I gather, though, that there is no contractual agreement or contractual consideration here, because most of these events, these athletes are bound to speak to the press in post-match press conferences. But having read the story, I saw no reaction from, the French Open organizers at Roland Garros, or any narrative that suggested that she will have to talk to the media. So quite evidently, unlike the NBA and many other elite sporting events that we've seen in the past, she apparently will not be forced to speak to the press. But it is disappointing. I understand what she's saying, because they go through some harrowing experiences. Sometimes, I think she said, sometimes you lose a match, you don't want to talk to anyone. You lost and you're disappointed, you're dejected, you're disgusted, and you have to, face up to questions. But it's a part of the sport. So for me, it's disappointing that she has taken this position.
Definitely. And my issue is when you turn the press conference into one about George, when I'm the one there sitting doing the interview. That's not cool. All right, we go to break. We'll be back.